and started it straight away.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it looked like you were being born out of some weird, strange, magical moment. It was like little Zab, little Zab. Sorry about that. That was a standard kerfuffle with Zoom, Google, and then my Zoom thing then decided to log me out. So I was like, shit, what's my password?
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see the Zoom thing. I just clicked on the Google Hangouts, so whatever it was.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, good.
So the thing for me that's coming up next. So obviously, like I've had like a bit of a shitter of a couple of months with just dealing with this injury bollocks.
Yeah.
And then had to quarantine or isolate for the last 8 days until
you timed that badly because like you don't have to do that anymore now, do you?
I know, shit, isn't it?
Yeah, really shit.
Yeah, I've had to isolate and quarantine, and basically it was like, how can I use this week structure in a good way after Wales? So Wales was really good because it was a great opportunity to get some miles in, get some confidence back, and then it was like, fuck, what can I do next? And I'm stuck at home. So Ken did this brutal week training plan. Really brutal, really, really hard. I think the total, it was like 18 or 19 hours worth of riding. Try and find the TUS number because we all love a good TUS number.
TUS, yeah.
It was like 18 or 19 hours riding. Technically, the last session was yesterday, which was 2.5 hours, just like pretty easy.
Yeah.
But the TUS, 18. If you do Monday to Sunday, it's 18 hours, 15 minutes of riding. On the turbo.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, just short of 1,000 PSS.
That's So I occasionally, like when I used to go down to my mum's when she lived far away for Christmas, and there wasn't much to do, I would try and sit on the turbo and just try and rack up as many hours as I could, and like I'd occasionally hit a 3-hour day, and then I'd be like, nah, yeah, that's it. Next day, 1 hour. Yeah.
It's tough, but like it was like, what can I do with this week where I can't go outside that's going to be useful and beneficial to me? So did that. We dropped my FTP down because of the injury and everything like that, which is completely the right thing to do. Did that, and Ken messaged me going, "You've broken training peaks," and I was like, "Okay, I like the sound of that, breaking training peaks, but what does that mean?" Sent me some random graph. Apparently, on this graph, you can't go below 0. I went below 0, and he was like, "Long and short of it, you're riding at a higher wattage than we thought you were set at, considerably so." And I was like, that's great news then. So that's a bit so on the subject of, so that's a weird kind of being productive.
And that you haven't exacerbated your injury or anything? No,
it's been okay.
It's right. Okay, cool.
It's been okay, which is really good. The only, I felt okay after Wales. I just didn't feel fit. I was a bit sore, but I didn't feel fit. And so, I mean, this has been a 2-month process of physio, rehabilitation, working with chiropractors, going to the gym, trying to build strength up and basically all over, in every sense of the word. And it was really nice to get that positive. So what this has led to is that I always had in my diary Badlands gravel race. Now, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get there because it's in Spain, travel, all that kind of stuff. But I think I can make it work, which is fantastic news in my opinion. I'm double vaccinated. I've got all the tests to be able to do pre-flight tests, the tests out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it should be okay. Now, Ken was like, I've got an idea of how we can get some little hacks out of going out there. Because in Spain, as we've seen from the Vuelta at the moment, it's like freaking 30, 40 degrees. It's so he's like, we're doing bloody hot baths. I love a bath, but he's like, it's got to be that hot that you can just about not stand it, just to allow your body to acclimatize to it. And that's he's like, you shouldn't do it until like about a week or 2 before going, but we need to get on that like a couple of times a week just to allow your body to acclimatize to it.
So we did this. We had a race in we went and did a stage race in Indonesia like a few years ago. And it was on the start line of the TT. It was a 10-mile road bike TT of all things, stage 1. And the start line of the TT, my Garmin said, I think 42 degrees. And we had we did a heat protocol the week before. So we got a baby ear temperature sensor, and we'd do every day, I think it was, you had to spend 30 minutes with your core temperature over, fuck, what was it? I think 38 and a half or something. So we had like 2 heaters in a tiny little room, no fan, sat on the turbo, pedaling away, and then basically do your ear temperature every couple of minutes, and you just ride at like whatever wattage you could until your core temperature hit whatever it did, and then you had to then ride for another 30 minutes, and then you were meant to then take a hot bath. We didn't do the hot bath thing because by that point we were fucked. But that 30 minutes every day, and like honestly, it really helped. And it was just the week before, because what you don't want to do is do something for like 4 weeks where it actually detrains you. You can detrain for like, it doesn't matter, like it's not going to affect you that much. But yeah, I mean, it was still, you know, fucking hot when we went out there, and everyone's power was like 30 watts down or whatever. But it didn't feel like something that, you know, our bodies were just rejecting, if that makes sense. So I'd recommend doing that.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's got to help. Like anything that can help. You know, this is a 750 kilometer gravel race across the Sierra Nevada desert. So like, it's going to be hot.
Cool. That's cool.
And, you know, my stance, and I just before talking to you, I've had another big call about some other projects, and they're like, what's your stance to this? And I was like, do you know what? It's just to finish. That's all I want to do. I want to finish it. I got to build that confidence back up to be able to race these kind of races, and I'm just going to try and finish it in the time cut and enjoy the experience, which is exactly what Wales was as well. And anyway, what I really wanted to talk to you, and I appreciate, I literally texted you out of the blue like last week going, dude, let's do a podcast talking about World Tour time trials. That was basically what I texted you. And I think I did it because I knew that the first stage of the Vuelta this year was a time trial, and we've had some pretty fascinating time trials in the Grand Tours over the last year. I'm going to say over the last year because that kind of covers 6 Grand Tours effectively. Like we look at, you know, Van der Poel in the Tour de France going completely off sponsor for almost everything under the sun and doing an incredible TT for someone who's not a time trialist. You look at Tour de France last year, the Pogacar Primoz story. I don't need to say much more than that. And, you know, the face of Wout van Aert and Tom Dumoulin in that is the thing that captures that race for me more than anything. You look at La Vuelta this year, and it was, you know, awesome to see Primoz absolutely smash it. And then you got the Olympic time trial. So what I kind of really wanted to cover with you, because I think it's fascinating, the art of time trialing, and time trialing at that level, especially because it's basically the rule book is thrown out in the context of what you can and can't use. And I wanted to kind of cover with you. Is there like, you see it firsthand. You're obviously very involved with that with Aerocoach. What are the things are you starting to see are the trends turning into World Tour time trialing, and how can that then relate to Joe Blogs or John Smith?
So touching on what I think what's changed over the past few years since we've seen the more kind of tech-centric approach to TTs. You know, I remember a year when, I think it was when Menchov won the Giro, and it was him versus De Luca, and De Luca had a chance. It was a rainy day through the centre of Rome. It was when Menchov came off on that straight cobble bit, and the guy jumped out of the car to give him his spare bike. And De Luca, it was a technical circuit, and De Luca did it on a road bike with clip-ons because his team manager said, "Oh, he's quite an aggressive rider. He'll probably be really good on a road bike on this, whatever it was, like 10-mile time trial, 16K." And it was just madness. And this was a Grand Tour where if he had done a stonking TT and he had some kind of focus on it, he might well have won the Giro by the end of that, especially because Menchov crashed and lost some time. So those days are gone now. And I think that even though the number of TTs and the length of TTs in the big races has decreased, the organisers have made them so hard now that you will gain time if you focused on it. And it's not just a hill climb that people are doing. they're doing TT that require a bit of technique and a bit of input on equipment and things. And so teams have kind of wised up to that, and the teams that have historically in the past got away with using maybe off-brand things, or they've had the budget to be able to buy their own stuff because they don't necessarily have a particular tire sponsor or wheel sponsor or whatever. They've kind of increased in number, as in some teams have got more budget to spend on tech because they know that they'll get a result out of it if they've done their tech homework, that is. And then some of the other teams, I think the bigger companies aren't really providing what the riders in those kind of races need. So it's very niche, a Grand Tour time trial and the kind of equipment that you need at the pro level is not the same as the sort of equipment that you'll need for a triathlete, which is the way the industry is going, because triathlon's a much bigger market. So the bigger companies don't necessarily have the stuff available to provide to these big teams. And the R&D budgets that they're spending are going to be on things like, standard road bikes, gravel bikes, to a lesser extent triathlon, because gravel's taking over as something that everyone wants to get involved with, rather than triathlon, which is more fringe than road. So I think that there's both of those things happening at the same time. And by both of those things, I mean teams understanding how tech is important and wanting to push hard on tech, and some of the companies not being able to provide them with it, leads teams to open, leaves the door open for people to use stuff that they want. And that's kind of where Aerocoach nicely steps in. And where we've positioned ourselves, because we're a company that works well in small niche areas, and will make the thing that needs to be made regardless of the R&D cost and the general market thing. So if we're making a wheel or a handlebar or something, we'll just keep pumping R&D in it until we end up with the best one. So the big companies can't really afford to do that. And because, we're notoriously secretive, I know that's an oxymoron, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Because we are notoriously secretive, it gives us the opportunity to work with lots of different people without anyone being worried about crossover. And in the past, companies that have done, tech stuff behind the scenes for World Tour teams generally just get they might work with one, and then another team might come along and want to have all the secrets from that team and things like that. So we're the official aero partners for Quebec and X-Tash, but we do work with, as I'm sure people know, we work with a lot of the other teams behind the scenes.
Yeah,
and just as customers rather than advice. So Quebec and X-Tash are our sponsored team that we provide all of the help to, but we have clients in the other teams. We're allowed to do that as part of our contract.
And as you say, it's a confidentiality thing. Things are kept to the team that you're working with, and nothing goes beyond that team, which is the best way to do it. It's completely the best way to do it.
Yeah, it would be nice, I'm sure people think it would be nice if we just sort of shouted about everything that we did, but then you almost betray the trust that the team has put in you by choosing your stuff. And it also, it doesn't really respect the team sponsors that have allowed you them to use your stuff as well. So if we started shouting about, from the rooftops about the things that we do and the people that have used our stuff and things, too much publicly, then it's almost rude. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. And in business, it doesn't matter if you're rude or not, I suppose. It's just, as most people think, it's just the bottom line, but it's not really how we want to portray ourselves. We just want to do the work and make the best stuff. And if people want to use it, then great. And as it turns out, people are using it. So that is good.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the cycling industry, actually, manners does go a long way, because I think it travels very quickly if people are, bitching about things, or I don't know, spreading rumors, or et cetera, or shouting about stuff they should be shouting about. I think things do actually sort of start to circulate very, very quickly, because the cycling industry as an industry is very small, and everyone kind of knows everyone, or knows, or someone knows someone. It's very well connected and very close. I think, for me, what's been that's one of my favorite things is, the first. You don't tend to see it so much at the Giro, definitely at the Tour de France. The first time trial in the Tour de France, you see how many teams have gone off brands and off sponsor and what they're kind of looking at doing. And, as you say, there's definitely this bigger market now on the triathlon side as opposed to the time trialing side. I mean, we in the UK are a very odd bunch of people that we actually have a huge time trialing scene. There's not many other countries like that. Maybe Denmark,
There just isn't the quantity of races that you could have in the UK. I don't think I mentioned this on the podcast before, but like I'm the district secretary for club events, which the weekday events that you get, like the smaller events. And on any one night in just our district, and of which there are like 20, 25 districts in the country, there could be up to like 10, 11, 12 races just within a 45-minute drive of where I live. And that's just crazy because, you'll get maybe a handful of people at each one, maybe, 10, 15 people or something, but then you multiply that up and it's just a lot of people doing rides, all wanting to go as fast as they can over a set distance. And most of them knowing that in some small way, that changing their equipment might make them quicker. So it's always in the back of people's minds. Where if you just go out for a bike ride with your friends and all you want to do is just ride around with your friends, then you're not necessarily looking to optimize your speed and ride away from the group, because that's not the point of your bike ride. Whereas if you've entered a TT, the idea is to get to the finish as fast as you can. And that just slightly switches your mindset over how you approach that and how you approach riding your bike outside of races and the kind of things that you'll do and the equipment that you'll use. So from the UK perspective, and there's loads of, you can see that in the number of places in the UK that have a focus on TT equipment and aero equipment and stuff like that, and the technology behind it. I started out doing TTs. That's back in 2006. I mean, that was how I got into the sport from triathlon, to be fair, but but straight into TTs from there. I haven't stopped since. I raced every single year, and absolutely love it.
It's just what I think is so great is it's such a good entry point into a competitive side of cycling. I think time trialing and cyclocross are the two.
Yes,
because cyclocross is good fun and it helps improve your technical ability, your handling, that kind of thing. And in a cyclocross race, no one really gives a shit where you finish. In a time trial, it's basically the same. The only person that actually gives a shit is you. Generally speaking, no one else really cares. Before COVID, and maybe it's starting to get a bit better now, you'd get the whole finisher thing all printed up on a big board, and you're only looking for your name. You're not looking for anyone else. It doesn't really matter. So, I mean, I always say it, and I couldn't stress it any more, that if you want to look into doing something that's competitive, time trialing is a great way. You don't need to do it on a time trial bike. You don't need to do it on anything fancy. You could rock up on a gravel bike or a Brompton or your commuter with panniers on. It's just about pushing yourself to whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Exactly. And I think that having the ownership is on you for the effort as well. So you're not going to be dropped by someone, or, and if you feel like you're on a bad day, it doesn't matter. You'll just push hard and you'll still get a good ride out of it. And that's the other thing is that, especially as the tech focus keeps going up and up, and it will continue to do so, having to turn up on like a 10 grand spaceship to think that you've got to take part is something that you want to avoid. And so we've been like really hot, and like for years now, Aerocoach has been really hot on trying to promote road bike time trials as like an official thing. So, we'll promote races that specifically say you can't have a TT bike, you have to use just a normal road bike. And although, yes, you can buy very expensive road bikes, at least it doesn't put people off when you turn up on the start line. A very expensive road bike just looks very similar to the cheap road bike that you might have started on. Yes, it might be made out of carbon or be a bit lighter or whatever, but it doesn't look demonstrably different. Whereas if someone turns up on a triathlon bike with all the trimmings, then suddenly it's a bit like, is this as accessible as I thought it was? Exactly. So I think, but as you say, you can turn up on anything you want. And so, it is a very nice way to push yourself. No one else minds about what speed you do apart from you. And it's kind of, it's a nice way to measure progress. You don't have to have a power meter and all this kind of thing. You don't have to have all the funky kit. You can just turn up and, is your time faster than last week? No, right, we'll keep training and then you'll improve it.
It's very simple. And I think that's what's so welcoming about it is it's such a simple concept. What I did, something that also to talk about is you organised a gravel hill climb, didn't you? This weekend just gone.
Yes.
How was that?
Yeah. It was great. I mean, we had so I live in Malvern, which is kind of sort of southwest of Birmingham, and it's a fantastic place to ride a bike. Loads of people ride off-road and on-road around where we live, and I accidentally came down the wrong road off the top of the Malvern Hills on my road bike and bounced my way to the bottom, and it was this gravel track, and it was about 2 kilometers long, 5% gradient, and made it to the finish alive, and then thought, well, do you know what? So we did some inquiries, and there's a school at the bottom. We got the school involved, and they let us use their facilities. We got a local bike shop to help provide servicing and things, and we set up a little gravel hill climb. It's effectively a closed road because there's no cars on it, because it's a public road, but no one's driving up it because it's really bumpy. And it's just something a little bit different. And what I really enjoyed was that there was no consensus on what the right bike was to use. People were turning out to road bikes, with mountain bikes, on a downhill mountain bike, gravel bikes, different width of tires and shape of tires, and all this kind of thing. It was great. And it was just a nice way to get people into racing. I'm a big fan of racing, and I know I'm biased because I've done it myself for a while, but I feel as though the buzz you get from sticking a number on your back and pushing yourself really hard, and then chatting to people afterwards about, how the race went and how, or maybe I can improve it next time or whatever. It really does kind of improve the atmosphere when you're out riding with people. So we did this little race. We've got dozens and dozens of people turned up. So we're going to try and put another one on before the end of the year, hopefully, as long as the weather's nice. That's the goal. And then try and get even more people.
How long's the climb?
2K. So
it's about 5%.
Yeah, so the winner did it in just over 6 minutes. And then some of the juniors were taking kind of 13, 14 minutes. And most people were kind of sub 10-ish. So yeah, it's a decent length, and it kind of kicks up after halfway as well. So everyone went too hard to start and then grovelled their way to the finish.
And what's the elevation game?
Well, if it's 5%, it'll be, what's that, times...
I'm terrible at maths.
Well, 100 meters, 5% is 5 meters. So multiply that by 10, then 2. So 250 meters. No. Is that right?
Some figure between 1 and 1,000.
No, hang on. Of course, it's easy. Why are you making me look stupid? 2.
Yeah, you're the one that's got the PhD here. You should be able to do this.
Yeah. I can't. You've thrown me. I'm gone now. Whatever. It's 5%.
5%.
Well, I mean, it's got to be 10 times 50 times 2. So 2. Yeah, well done. Yeah, congratulations. I do this sort of thing constantly. 125 meters.
125 meters per.
I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway.
Okay.
Whatever.
I'm gonna say why I'm asking because I wasn't gonna say, but I am gonna ask because I am thinking about doing a gravel Everesting.
Oh right, cool. And you need to really find the right one for that. So 5% is too shallow. Ideally. So I've helped out on an Everesting, and ideally you want something that's, I'd say, 20% is too much, 10% is not enough.
Yep.
So somewhere in between, but it's really important that you have something you can descend safely and quickly.
That's the priority.
So a straight up one. I think I'd say 5% is not enough. You'd just be there all day. The problem with gravel is then you would lose traction depending on the bike you're using. So you couldn't have something that's too steep and too loose. Otherwise, you'll just be spinning out. And certainly when you're tired and you're losing kind of control over the bike, it's all right on a road bike because you'll just kind of keep going. But yeah, I reckon, what does gravel count as though? Like how loose is the surface for it to be gravel? There's a bit of tarmac halfway up this climb, for example. So I don't think that wouldn't count.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the majority of it is off-road, I think that's kind of probably how it would work. I've been inquiring into it from the Hells 500 guys, and they seem pretty blasé about it. So I don't know many people have done it. So I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. That'd be a different one
That
to do.
does sound cool. Absolutely,
Yeah. I have found a climb near me here in Old Peakland, and that climb, I tossed it up. It's a private road that goes to a farm. There's basically a cattle grid at the top, and there's like a parking space at the top. Goes straight into the center of the peaks. So I did a bit of this one. I also think is too shallow. It would be 132 reps.
That's too many.
Yeah.
you want something between sort of 50 and 70, I'd say 50 and 70 reps.
Yeah, I think so. Not nothing like Box Hill. Let's just say that. But you know, it's a hunt to try and find that climb, which is if anyone has any suggestions of options anywhere in the UK, please send me a message because it'd be quite useful. If they can, 50 to 70 reps, kind of down with that. Loose, but not too loose. Something which 650B wheels would go along nicely, I reckon, just because there's a bit more comfort and a bit more traction, just in case, especially when tired. Anyway, I've completely gone off topic of what I was going to talk about. So going back to time trialing.
Yes.
So there's been rule changes, hasn't there, with TT bikes?
Yeah, so the rule changes came in for frames like a little while ago. So the companies are now, the new frames that you see coming out now are the ones that are making the benefit of the rule changes. And really what the UCI did was they kind of relaxed some of the more constrictive rules over frame tube shape ratios and some things you can do with frames. So for a little while, there was some rules about not being able to tape over bottle cage bolts, and you weren't allowed to cover things up and all of that. And the UCI kind of now allowed that sort of thing as long as you don't create an extra shape when you do it. So you can tape over a bottle cage bolt hole, but you can't add a shape into that hole to make it more aero, if that makes sense. So, which I agree with, that's nice. Aesthetically, it looks cool to have a bike that's completely kind of smooth, which I think is the look they were going for. But the frame tube shape stuff was, everyone knows, I'm sure, about the 3-to-1 ratio that the UCI still apply to certain components, but the frame itself and the forks, you can have, they just specify maximum and minimum dimensions. So you can have a minimum dimension of 10 millimeters now on everything if you want. Not that you'd want to make a down tube or a head tube that's 10 mil wide. Although I think the head tube's still 28 mil, but anyway, but you can have it 8 centimeters deep. So that's why some like forks now are now 80 millimeters deep with a 10 millimeter width, giving you an 8-to-1 ratio, which is a little bit more aerodynamic. And in my opinion, looks kind of cool. Like, I think that, you know, deep tubes look great, and they've managed to kind of, the UCI have managed to kind of tweak the rules a little bit to allow for more innovation, faster equipment, without really changing things dramatically. So the bikes look a little bit different, which is great, but they haven't kind of opened any cans of worms necessarily. And I think they've done that, actually, with those rules, they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah. So what bikes have we seen that have come out that have ticked off for those rules now?
So the new Trek Speed Concept, which hasn't really been properly announced by Trek yet, the Speed Concept disc brake bike, the Canyon Speed Max disc brake bike has got, it looks pretty nice. I quite like the look of that one. And then I'm expecting to probably see another Merida at some point, and then Giant, they'll come out with something, probably a disc brake TT bike that's got, although I wonder whether they'll have a triathlon version first and then come out with another one later. But yeah, most of the major players, like the Shib Disc TT, doesn't necessarily have massive deep tubes, but is a decent bike. And then obviously Cervélo, they've got a bike that kind of came out, probably was in development before those rules kind of moved around. And it's not really like the new regulations aren't making bikes super bikes, but they do just move things away from the template that a lot of manufacturers were using to create their bikes, which was, so the UCI frame regulations, you have you have areas where you can add material and areas where you can't have it. So there are dimensions as to how the tubes can interact with each other. So the head tube can't be outside of a 16 centimeter box, for example. This is why you'll often see the junction between the top tube and the seat tube of a bike. You'll often see like a triangle in that area, like a gusset. And that's because the UCI allowed the use of a certain amount of material in that place. And so manufacturers instantly jumped on it and were adding material to make it more aero, but mainly because in a lot of cases, the UCI template picture that they put on the regulations had a little gusset there. So people ended up really kind of converging on a very similar looking bike, which just took those UCI, template shapes. They made a bike out of it and then kind of tweaked the tube shapes and things. Whereas I think people are kind of looking a little bit more outside the box now, which is nice. And what we don't want is for all the TT bikes to look the same, because that would be a bit sad. And I don't think it's necessary. I think that you can definitely, there are things you can do. In fact, I was brought on for consultancy for a big brand, and one of the presentations from one of the other people that was used for consultancy at the time, he gave a presentation on what you could do within the UCI regulations. And my goodness, like the interpretation was legit what this chap did, but the frame shapes that came out of it were just something out of this world. I mean, I'm sure the UCI would just ban it instantly if they didn't like the look of it. But it looked pretty crazy. And the Hope bike is quite a good example of that. It was from the side, looks normal. You flip it in 3D and look at it from the front, and then suddenly it's crazy. And the UCI don't have, a kind of 3D like tilt in terms of the kind of ethos of the regulations aren't really thought about in 3D necessarily. So that's where the Hope bike kind of slotted in and why it was allowed to be used, I suppose.
It's interesting. And then the other one that's come out or we've seen being raced, I guess, is the new Factor one.
Of course, yeah. Sorry, yes, the new Factor Hanzo. Yeah. So that takes that kind of 3D concept a little bit more. So it's got quite wide forks and quite wide seat stays, and it's got the handlebar has got something similar to the Scott Plasma 6 triathlon bike. So it's got kind of a little clamp that goes up and down the mono post on the handlebar. It looks really nice. Like, I like it. It's very thin as well. So they've taken advantage of some of those regulations we're talking about in terms of width of tubes. So yeah, it would be good to see. I mean, from our perspective, manufacturers, it doesn't seem like are really putting out much data these days in the way that they used to. So we used to see from some of the bigger companies lots of things like wind tunnel graphs about wheels and frames and bikes and comparisons and stuff. It feels to me that the manufacturers kind of moved away from that now, and there are a few different reasons for that. The cynical might be, might be because the stuff isn't any good, but I think that it's more that people are trying to focus on improving weight and stiffness characteristics, and aero is obviously there, but it can be quite tricky for some manufacturers to really make improvements. So we haven't really seen a lot of these comparisons. So we will get bikes in for testing when we have riders on them, and sometimes we'll have the opportunity to do bike only testing, and we have riders coming in with 2 bikes and things. So as time goes on, we get to understand which of these things are fast and which aren't when we're doing our own commercial sessions. But up until then, we don't know. And we're actually going through a process at the moment. We've got 3 bikes that we're going to be doing a back-to-back comparison on in the wind tunnel soon, more for our own kind of internal use for the team, but it's expensive, and it's really hard to do, and we won't be publishing the results because it's not really relevant for anyone else but us at this stage, and it's going to cost us a ton of money. So
fair enough.
Yeah, and we like to try and give people as much information as we can for free and things, but in this instance, it's for one of our riders to go as quite quick as possible. So we don't really want to give away the game away too much. But yeah, those sorts of things you don't really get. So manufacturers, I feel, aren't being as open as they used to be in terms of what data they have. Often you'll say, oh, it's 10% faster than the last one and whatever, but everyone always says that because otherwise you wouldn't release something, would you, if it wasn't faster? And it would just be nice to have some.
It's funny you say that. Specialized is a prime example, eh?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of manufacturers do it, but everything's 10% faster and 10% lighter and 10% stiffer.
Yeah.
And quantifying the weight of something is easy. Quantifying the stiffness of something is practically impossible, depending on how you want to try and measure it. Quantifying the aerodynamics is tricky as well. It can be problematic depending on what your protocols are. So I understand the difficulty, but I do feel as though companies should start to be more open with. I mean, they've all got data on their stuff, haven't they? So why not share some? If they want to back up their products with actual data, then share it. Yeah, maybe we'll see that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's 100%. There's people who are very focused on wanting to know that information and data, and it is, people who are interested in the benefits and gains aerodynamically, whether that's from time trialing, triathlon, crit racing, whatever it is. There's definitely benefits that can be had. Now, we've kind of covered a bit about time trial bikes and what's coming with those. Now, something I get asked a lot: what's the difference between a time trial bike and a triathlon bike?
In years past, not very much, apart from the seat tube angle, to be honest. So from UCI regulation perspective, your seat can't be as far forward as you can get away with on a triathlon bike. So there are limits in most triathlon like organizations as to how far forward your saddle can go. For a triathlon, it's actually quite advantageous to have your saddle a little bit further forward because it opens up your hip angle and stops you compressing your hip flexors, which is something you'll use for the run. On a TT bike, the UCI didn't like having far forward saddles because that's what Graham O'Brien did. And so the UCI saddle regulation is basically to stop Graham O'Brien from being able to ride the Superman position. They brought that in to kind of like do him over, but kept it. And, it is what it is. It rewards some riders of particular anthropometrics and hinders others. But yeah, so seat tube angle is a big one in terms of the difference between a triathlon and a TT bike. Given that the UCI regulations are quite restrictive now, not like they used to be in the 90s, where you could get away with like loads of different things, and there was a big crossover between TT bikes and triathlon bikes. Triathlon bikes now can have much deeper tube shapes. They can have much more dramatic, front ends and all this kind of thing, and they can miss out tubes if they don't want them. So they might have missing seat stays. They might have like a beam bike design or a Y-frame design or something like that. So triathlon bikes have a lot more opportunity to have things like integrated storage and integrated nutrition and hydration and all of that. So I'd say that in terms of performance, not loads, because the top triathlon bikes are very, very quick and very aerodynamic. They might have more integrated storage in a manner that doesn't increase their drag, but keeps it kind of drag neutral. And the top TT bikes are going to be most likely lighter, and have less options to be able to integrate storage and things. So you'll have companies that have two different bikes if they've got the opportunity to. Specialized, good example of that. They've got a triathlon bike that's got what effectively looks like a gigantic sail off the back of it where you fill it with water, and then their TT bike is quite minimalist in comparison. And then Cervélo have got the PX series bikes, which more like a beam bike design, so they don't have a seat tube and they don't have any seat stays, in comparison to the P series and P5 disc, where it's a much more kind of like traditional UCI bike. But the performance of both those frames aerodynamically is, according to Cervélo, quite similar, and the difference is mainly in the weight. So the more integrated bikes have a slightly higher, a bit of a weight penalty. But if you were to take something like a standard UCI TT bike and then slap a load of bottles and things on it, it would end up being slower than one of these more integrated triathlon bikes. Exactly. So there has been a bit of a diversion these days, I'd say, between the two different types of bikes, away from geometry, which was in the past really the only thing that differentiated the two.
And I guess because I know the Cervélo range quite well, I know that the P5 disc is an aggressive bike. It's a very aggressive fit on it. It's a very aggressive bike. I have a P series. I have to size up even on that, which is a bike. The P series is designed to be a bike which can be used for both. You can make it work for triathlon. You can make it work for time trialing. It's a reiteration of the P2 and P3, which was Cervélo's best-selling bike of all time. It's basically those bikes with disc brakes. So what they did is they designed a bike which allowed the ability to be used for both and have the flexibility for both. It's not quite as aggressive as a P5 disc. It's probably similar geometry-wise, maybe to the PXs. But even me, I had to go up a size larger on that bike, just because for the kind of time trialing I do more of, it would be a hyper aggressive bike for me. And you know, there's definitely, I mean, for me, when I look at the Cervélo range, I'm always going to go for a 56 on the time trial side and a 54 on the road or gravel or whatever it is side, because I like the feel of a smaller road bike. But the time trial bike, I think being a bit bigger, because I compare it to when I previously had a Giant Trinity, and a 56 Cervélo in a TT is very similar to a size medium Trinity. On paper. It's interesting you mentioned about Giant as well, because the thing is with like time trialing bikes, the reason why I got a Giant Trinity was it was bang for your buck, one of the best bikes you could buy. That frame hasn't been updated in a very, 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 very long time.
Correct. Well, the Giant don't sponsor a Vuelta team at the moment, you'll notice. That may change next year, but in terms of the focus that they've had, it seems to be very much be on sort of high-end road, but not with the Vuelta team, you know, behind it. And they haven't come out with a TT bike. They're not really sponsoring triathletes at the moment either. You don't see lots of triathletes actually physically sponsored by Giant in the same way that like Canyon sponsoring loads of people, for example. So yeah, I mean, if they'd have to then, because they've gone so far away from it, they'd have to really then flip and switch and have a new thing. But I mean, Giant are going to come out with a better TT bike, of course they are. And it'll be it'll have disc brakes on it, I'm sure, and it'll be pretty good as well, I'm sure, and affordable, as you say. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. It'll also be interesting to see their route back into the World Tour, because they sponsored CCC, who obviously folded, and kind of left without a team. So whether we'll see which team they pick up. But their bike's pretty good, and so it'd be nice to see another one in the fray.
It's weird. It is quite weird not seeing them at World Tour again.
Yes.
You know, we've got them in the women's peloton on the Live Racing team. But you know, I mean, I guess you could argue them not being in the men's World Tour opened up the opportunity for Cube to step up to World Tour, because you know, coming in with Intermarché, Wanty, what is it, Wanty? It's a sort of a crazy long name for a team who are now in red at the Vuelta, which was amazing.
Fantastic.
It was awesome,
absolutely. Isn't it? I think it's 10 years after Rain Taramay won a Vuelta stage, I think. And he's done it again. Yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, no, I mean, Cube, I mean, you often get like smaller brands who've managed to retain the team when they make the big step up. So I think, you know, brands that have been in the World Tour and gone, there are quite a few. I mean, Focus aren't there anymore. Cube are there for the first time, which is cool. And they make some great bikes, like their Aero road bike. I really like the look of. I think it looks really, really good. Looks well thought out. They've got quite a cool triathlon rim brake bike, the Cube Aerium C68, and then they've got a Cube Aerium TT, which is the kind of disc brake UCI legal version, which is kind of based on that, and that looks pretty cool too. So I think you won't see bike brands that we've never heard of appearing out of nowhere. It'll be the kind of more established ones that make their way up to that kind of level. And you mentioned the women's Live team, and I think that, you know, that they have like a slightly different version of their TT bike in Live branding. It's not just a Giant Trinity with Live logos on it. It's actually a completely different bike. But it'd be interesting to see if they use that as an avenue for improving stuff. Like if they come out with a Live, let's say, disc brake TT bike before they come out with another one, just because that's where it's going to get used. I hope so. I think that'd be a nice way of doing it, rather than just waiting for the men's team.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, time will tell. Just depends where the companies want to spend their R&D. A lot of companies are just struggling to meet demand at the moment, and so spending R&D time and effort and resources making a new bike, which won't be available for goodness knows how long, is something that might be avoided in board meetings, and they'll just say, look, you've just got to knuckle down and work hard on fulfilling all the current orders, rather than coming out with something where people would be like, well, I'm going to cancel my order then because I might want that new one instead. So there's definitely, you know, a balance to be made internally for the larger companies, if they are behind on orders. And we hear stories about companies saying, like, you order a bike now, you won't get it until 2023. And then you think about, right, well, what's the life cycle of a bike, and the product life cycle, sorry, not life cycle of a bike, but the development life cycle. And in 2 years' time, is it going to be pointless because there'll be a new version out? I've just got my new bike that I've been waiting a year and a half for. So it's interesting, I think, how the market is going to dictate R&D internally for these larger companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I saw somewhere that it was Trek was saying 2023 for bikes ordered now, which is, I mean, it's mental when you think about it. And certain brands lead times are greater, certain are not quite as extreme. It does seem it's very brand by brand basis. Like depends on where the bikes are assembled, depends on where the obviously a lot of the frames are manufactured out in the Far East, but it also they might not be assembled there. For example, I know some brands that they're manufactured in the Far East, but actually are assembled in Germany, for example. So there's more control of being able to get more stock, because a frame takes up a lot less room than a bike. So being able to get more stock to a central location in Europe, in Germany, for example, and then sending out from there.
But then the other problem you run into is group sets, because you're getting hold of certainly Shimano stuff at the moment is quite problematic. And I know that, I think it was Trek that when everything hit, like last year, I think Trek were the ones who bought up like a lot of Shimano components and things in anticipation of there being some kind of shortage of some description, as people were cancelling orders and stuff. Interesting, I think. And from our perspective, there have been carbon shortages, raw carbon shortages, and we've seen that both with the places that we get some stuff made in the Far East, we get some stuff made here in the UK, and we make some of our own stuff too. And raw carbon shortages is not something we've really had to worry about before. And we've had to change, because then it just trickles down, because if you're changing the type of carbon you're using something, then you might have to change the layup. And then if you do that, then you need to do all of the R&D and all the safety testing again to make sure that the layup is okay. And so you either don't make anything because you haven't got the carbon that you want, or you have to start from scratch and do the R&D again and use a slightly higher grade of carbon or a slightly different grade in a different location or whatever. We're having fun playing with that, and I'm sure that other people are too.
So what's something to sort of finish up on is, what are the next things? What can you talk about are the next things coming for Aerocoach?
We've had a pretty decent year, I'd say, in terms of people using our stuff, and our stuff kind of being proven as well on the larger stage. We make wheels, and we've made wheels for ages. It seems like, years, and we've always said vociferously that our stuff is really fast, and now it's kind of the reason why these teams are using it and individuals are using it is because they've independently verified that our stuff is really good. So that has given us confidence in our own data, which we already had, but we knew it was good, but it's just nice to see it verified by lots of different places. And there's teams that have tested our stuff and have been not allowed to use it as well. So they've come back to us and said, oh, thanks very much for the wheel or whatever. We tested it, it's fastest, but our sponsor said no. And it's just like, okay, that's a shame. So using that information, it's helped to really refine the protocols that we use for testing when we're doing internal R&D. So, I'm looking across me at the moment, our head of engineering, who's smashing away at a project which is going to result in probably 3 products, which we will get used in about 3 years' time. We're at the Paris Olympics, and it'll be interesting to see how companies, for things like the Olympics, where, high-tech stuff that's non-sponsor specific is absolutely the name of the game. as a great kind of like proving ground for things. And yeah, we're going to work really, really hard on making sure that we get stuff there. On top of that, we've got a product that's been approved. Well, sorry, in the process of being approved by the UCI, or at least like, you know, they say, yes, we can use it. I don't know if they approve of our stuff or not. Generally speaking, they don't. But we've got a product that's literally ready to go. We're hoping to have it back in time for the Vuelta, but the approval process was kind of curtailed because they're all at the Olympics, so we weren't able to do that. But unfortunately, yeah, we were going to try and do that. So yeah, we have a product which will be coming out soon, which is a more road thing rather than track, and then you know, various other stuff. I mean, we've got some stuff in the Paralympics, which is going to be starting, I think, either tomorrow or Thursday, and not even in cycling. Like, we do stuff for parasport for different sports. So fingers crossed we'll get some medals out of that. And like we do, I like to see us as a kind of, you know, it's more of a technology company. So like we do, if someone comes to us with a cool idea and it's something that we can help with, we often try and say yes. And then try and fit it in. But I think what we want to do now is really kind of consolidate what we've got, make sure that we can sort out, you know, getting stock as fast as possible, because that's still, you know, day-to-day issue that we wrestle with, is how much stock do you have versus, you know, getting the orders in. I mean, traditionally we do everything pre-order, so that allows us to not sit on top of a warehouse full of stuff that's not getting used, because that's just inefficient and wasteful. But you have to balance that over being able to deal with an influx of orders if that happens. So the day-to-day kind of workings of running a business in that way is obviously quite tricky. But in terms of product development, yeah, we've got loads of stuff. So yeah, we've got this road thing, we've got these track things that are coming, and I think there's there's three or four other kind of like relatively big projects that we know we have to do, that are probably going to be kicking in about like 8 months time or so. So yeah, constant improvement. And on top of that, because we're an aftermarket company, for things like aero bars and stuff, every single day we're making little grommets and adapters and stuff to help people use our stuff on whatever bike they've got. More of the same, I think. But obviously our goal is to try and make the best stuff we can. So in terms of timescales, it's just as long as it takes for us to beat everything that's out there and then we release it. And I think that's quite a nice position to be in. Like, we don't necessarily have deadlines that we have to keep to, where you just gotta, I mean, we've never said whatever, let's just release it. You know, it's always like, no, it's not good enough. We'll have to wait. And if we've missed a big deadline, which we did do at one point this year, we said, no, we're not going to release that particular thing because it's not good enough yet. And then we carried on working. And then when it is as good as we can make it and it beats everything else that we've tested under our protocols, then it comes out. So we're lucky in that way. And I think that's probably why we've been able to have the success that we've had in terms of the quality and speed of our stuff, is because we're not beholden to a higher power that says, you come out with this now or we're canning the project. And that's always a concern, I think, in some of the larger companies, and why some of the smaller companies are able to compete, which is good for us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the prime, talking about the little grommets and odds and sods that you end up doing, I can straight up, we've spent time working out ways of refining my fit even more on the TT bike, and we've made these little funky little wavy things.
Yes.
That's the best way to talk about. They're great.
Well, I mean, that was when you came to the offices and we measured you up for what we needed to do. We printed out a prototype whilst you were here. We tested it on the bike. It did the job that we needed to do. And then I think we got it 3D printed out of titanium. And I think have you got it yet, or are we getting it painted first? I think getting it painted now.
I think Jess was saying you guys it's getting painted first or something.
Fine. So it's in the process of being painted, and then you'll get it. And that's just a nice, very mini little product life cycle where we identify a problem, we then come up with some solutions, we then make a prototype, we test it, and then get it manufactured and finished and then out. And obviously that only took a day to do all the design and everything, whatever, but that's kind of how everything works, just scaled up when you have the bigger products. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to getting them across to you. I think I sent you a picture, like they are done.
You sent me a little photo. I think it was in Jess's hands, like two baby, and then a thumbs up in the corner.
It's really good. So yeah. It's just that's just a nice little example of how these things work, because it is all just there's a set process to go through with these things, and then the stuff gets made, and the big companies, it'll be the same thing, but sometimes it's why having the big companies, they just have this kind of steamroller, kind of slow, like ocean liner feel to them sometimes. Where you can't be reactive to stuff, and you can't say, do you know what, I don't think this is quite working, let's go off in a different tangent. And being able to be nimble and reactive is such a benefit.
I don't know if I've ever said it to you before, but one of my mentors, he's my old tutor, and he's like a mentor to me, said to me, you always want to be a speedboat, not a battleship, because a battleship just goes in one line, but a speedboat can dodge around everything. And that's always stuck with me for years, is that mentality of like, be the speedboat, not the battleship.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say reactive, obviously you don't want to become overreactive on other things that are happening, because you need to have a clear idea of the direction you're going, and you don't want to just get distracted by, other things that people are doing, because it shouldn't matter. If you've decided I want to make a thing and I want it to be the best thing, then that's what you do, and you don't start kind of stealing ideas from other people or whatever. That's not the way to go. But being reactive, I think, to the market and what the market's gonna want is cool. I think there was a good quote. I'll probably get it wrong now, but it was like innovation. Oh, what is it? Something like innovation isn't the same as a good business idea. Like you can be innovative, but if it's not if it's not going to get traction, then it's just a fun idea. Whereas I think the true success of innovation is when you can come up with something that's different and potentially radically different, which then gets traction because people understand that it's got a benefit, and then they purchase it, buy it, use it, whatever. That's really the success that you need to measure yourself on, rather than just coming up with something weird and being like, it's innovative. It's like, well, kind of, yeah, but what's the point? The point of it is that you want it to be the thing that people use because it's better. And that's what we really focus on.
Amazing. You summed that up pretty damn well, my friend. I'm going to end it here. Thank you, Dav, so much for your time and talking bollocks with me for an hour and a bit. As always, it's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And don't kill yourself on your chain gang.
Oh yeah, no, chain gang tonight. Classic Tuesday evening, more than chain gang. You've been you've experienced it for yourself
on a gravel bike. It's great fun.
Yeah, you managed to keep up on the V group. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's good fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it, actually. I mean, the gravel bike I was on is, as gravel bikes go, is probably as fast as you can get. It is a fast gravel bike. But yeah, it was great fun. Anyone around Malvern, go and join that chain gang. See how long you can last.
Yeah.
Awesome.